What's going on, everyone? Last video out, we talked about how you can dominate tactics within Football Manager. Today, we are going to be talking about how you're going to be able to master your player rules instructions as well as opposition instructions to where you are dominating any opponent that you come up against. And one thing I want to address right away with player instructions is when you go to roll, you'll end up clicking on them to kind of select whatever you want to do. So for the central midfielder, it has the description of what a central midfielder does. However, with these roles, you will see in the instructions, all this is a brighter, kind of darker green. Then we go to attack and it adds something onto it, get further forward, which we can see in that brighter, darker green. I already have on that central midfielder on support role that I have kind of custom created. What it says in the description, once you start adding instructions to those roles, they completely change a majority of the time what that role is going to be able to do. So as an example, I'm going to be using the tactical board here, which if you guys wish to utilize this tool yourselves, I'll be linking it down below in the description. We're going to kind of highlight the defensive midfielder role right here. So say this is, we'll go with a segundo volante, which segundo volantes the majority of the time are played in a double defense midfield, but we're just going to use it as a kind of example here. So say we're over here with the segundo volante and we put on the instructions to move into channels. Instead of it staying centrally, which a lot of people probably think this is what they do, they go up, down. This is what they do. They are late arriving playmakers. This is all that they do. They go up and down like a box-to-box midfielder. That is not true. Once you put move into channels on, they start roaming from that original position into channels. So as we can see here with the player instructions, once you go to select the segundo volante role, support, when you see it all in that bright green, that is everything that you personally have added to it. So it essentially does what it originally is instructed to do, which is in the description of the role. However, once you put on the instructions, it starts adapting to what you want it to do. And on top of that, if you have a player like Josh Brownhill, who has quite a few player traits, those are going to play into effect with that role that they're in as well. So in other words, if you have a player with quite a few player traits, and you also have a role with quite a few player instructions, you're going to essentially be able to create Superman as a role. So what exactly are some of those player instructions that are more so those overpowered type ones? Well, already I've covered one of them that allows your roles to cover way more space, especially if they are midfielder type roles. Moving channels is definitely going to be one that you want on those roles. You can also utilize roam from position. I really like that combo with those two. It allows that midfielder to kind of be anywhere and everywhere all at once. Get further forward is a very popular one as well. If you want to be more aggressive, you can go with tackle harder. Now, keep in mind that probably will lead to a little bit more fouls going your side's way, but if you have someone that is actually pretty good at tackling and isn't really getting a whole heck of a lot of cards, why not throw it on there? When it comes to defensive roles, such as wingbacks and fullbacks, ones that I really like to use are cross more often, especially if they are creative and have pretty good passing and crossing ability, and you aim that at center, or you can do it at the far post as well, especially if you have a bigger striker or a bigger winger on that right or left-hand side, whichever wingback you end up putting it on. Now, you see cross from. We have cross from byline and cross from deep. Crossing from the byline is very, very good, and it allows for your side to cause chaos. However, cross from deep can also be pretty good. Say you have someone like a James Ward-Prowse that can play at right back or left back, and they are very good at playing the ball, like a Trent Alexander-Arnold. Crossing from deep can be a very viable option as well. So when it comes to those crossing options, it is basically going to be down to what type of playmaking ability do your wingbacks have. Are they more so that James Ward-Prowse, Trent Trent Alexander-Arnold type player where they have an array of passing ability? Or are they going to be more of a pacey type wingback where they do have some pretty good crossing ability, but due to them having that pace, you want to abuse that cross from the byline type? So when it comes to your center backs, what you're kind of going to want to do is adapt to how you're wanting your center backs to play. And as we can see, there are quite a few roles now for center backs. It used to be just a few, now there are 5 of them. Now, with each one, it is pretty unique. In order to use a wide center back, you have to be playing a 3 in the back. You can't use wide center backs in a 2 center back, so 4 in the back tactic. You got to have a 5 in the back or 3 in the back, however you wish to interpret that. Now, with ball playing defenders, you're going to want to play the ball out of the back. Why? Because they're ball playing defenders. You will need to have that on in your tactic instructions, which for those of you that need to know where that is, it is in your in possession tab within your tactical instructions. You will want to play out from the defense. We'll get into the tactic instructions in a few. Now, one thing that I want you to notice about this 3 in the back right here is that we have the central ball playing defender on a different type of role than the other 2. And for that ball playing defender, the central one, we have them on cover. And what it does is it drops them a little bit, which you can see that here in the diagram. Instead of it being a flat back 3, we have it on cover, so it drops him a little bit. It acts as somewhat of a safety valve. Now, I will say, however, you can play the flat back 3, whether it is normal central defenders on defend or ball playing defenders on defend. You can do that because it is very, very good this year. If you wish, however, to have somewhat of a safety valve back there, just put it on cover and they'll play a little bit deeper. And when you have it on cover where they're playing a little bit deeper, you'll notice on the instructions, I don't have anything on them. Whether they were the ball playing defender, central defender, libero, I probably wouldn't have anything on them. Although libero, I probably would have to put something on them because there's nothing in the instructions. Which in that case, if we did decide to go with the libero, just as an example, I would probably instruct them to take more risks, even though I put him on the defend duty, which instructs him automatically to hold his position. So he's not going to go bombing up the field like a libero on support would. He's going to stay more so in that defensive midfield area. Now, with the defensive midfield area, such as a Segundo Volante or someone that you can put some instructions on, you're going to definitely want them moving into those channels. You're going to want them tackling harder. You're essentially going to want them to be a ball-winning midfielder on crack. That is the best way that I could possibly put it. You want them to be able to not only win the ball, but to be able to move the ball and sometimes even put that ball in the back of the net for you. And to be able to put the ball in the back of the net for you, sometimes you'll want to put on get further forward depending on how aggressive you want them to be, as well as take more risks, because that allows them to take more risks in the playmaking department. Now for wingers, whether they are wingers on support or attack, inside forward, same roles there, and the inverted winger as well, those are a majority of the popular roles that we use with our wingers, especially if we're playing a 4-3-3 type. Those are the ones that we usually go with. What are the instructions to put on them to help make them just that little bit more overpowered? Once again, with aiming those crosses, it's going to be at center or at the far post if you have a big striker or some big wingers. Now, I like to have mine shoot more often. You probably think that is wasteful. It can be wasteful. However, if they are very, very good and have the Holy Trinity, so finishing, dribbling, and first touch like a striker, they essentially are wide strikers. So instructing them to shoot more often is actually a pretty good thing to have on there. Now, when we get to those strikers for the instructions, you basically just want to leave them as is. There is, however, one role that I suggest making one change to, and that is the pressing forward. So if you have a pressing forward and it's not on attack, it's on support, which is a very, very good role to use, by the way. You go pressing forward on support. We then go down to the instructions. You're going to want to instruct them to shoot more often because they will be like a support type player. Yes, they're still going to shoot, but you want them to still have that goal scoring output of a striker. And putting on shoot more often allows them to do that way easier. Which, once again, with that move into channels type instruction, you're definitely going to want your strikers to be doing that just like your midfielders are so that they're able to cut down those passing lanes and intercept the ball, move the ball off, or even drive on in and put it home. But now that we've covered those player instructions, we're going to go over opposition instructions. And this is where you can really help lock down your opponent and make sure you are suffocating anything that they want to do. Because yes, making sure that you have the right roles within the right tactic is going to be a huge, huge time help. But in those scenarios that you need a little bit extra help to lock down your opponent, opposition instructions are going to be where it's at. So here we see my next opponent, West Brom. They play a 4-2-3-1. How exactly would I make sure that we are going to keep them from generating any offense? The first thing that I would do is trigger press their wingbacks and show them on to their weaker foot. Why do we do that? So that we take away their creativity from the back out wide. Because if they are not able to create out wide, they're going to have to force it through the middle. And with my tactic that I'm running, we have numbers through the middle. So if we take their creativity away out wide, force it inside, we're going to force way more turnovers. Now, with those wingers, if they are Mbappe type level, you're going to want to do show on to weaker foot, tackle harder, trigger press, and tight mark. You want to do everything possible to take them out of the game. And when I have instructed this on Mbappe, because I've had to play him a boatload in one of my saves, this keeps him off the score sheet a majority of the time. I'd say probably 80% of the time he is not scoring. Now, if it is a winger that is not Mbappe level, you're going to want to have them shown on to their weaker foot. And if they're causing you a problem, you'll then want to put on trigger press. So off the rip, just go show on to weaker foot. But if they're causing you problems or you think they're going to cause you problems, go ahead and trigger press. With the number 10s, this is a very interesting one because you're probably going to think, all right, if we are showing on to the weaker foot, we're trigger pressing those wingers, we're probably going to want to do the same to a number 10 in a 4-2-3-1. Nope, we're going to do show on to weaker foot and tight mark, because when we tight mark them, it's going to take away their creativity to then get the ball back out wide to those wingers, which if they are causing us problems, we're already trigger pressing them, showing them onto their weaker foot, or if they're Mbappe level, we have completely marked them out of the game to the best of our ability. So if you can tight mark them, show them onto their weaker foot, it's going to make their life a whole heck of a lot harder. Now, with trigger press, you can do that as well. However, it allows them to really think on their feet, and a lot of 10s are pretty good at doing that, so they end up finding those passes anyways. So you end up just going tackle harder. And with those strikers, if they're anyone but Erling Haaland, you just go weaker foot. If they're Erling Haaland, you do the exact same thing that you did to those Mbappe type styles of wingers that really cause you a boatload of problems. So tight mark, we go trigger press, always tackle harder, show on the weaker foot. And with the tackle harder, do not think it's going to make you give away a boatload of pens. It's not. It's going to make sure that you make life on those players as difficult as possible. Now, that is kind of how I would do opposition instructions for that scenario against West Brom, or in a scenario where I'm having to kind of make sure I am taking certain players or player styles out of the game. How would I do it generally? Just kind of against any Jim or Joe that you are playing against. So we're here on the positions overall. You still want to do the exact same with those wingbacks, to where you have it trigger pressing and showing them onto their weaker foot. It's not just those deeper wingbacks or fullbacks within a 4 in the back. You also want to do that to wingbacks if they're playing a 5-3 in the back, however you want to interpret that. Then if they are playing instead of wingbacks, they're using those midfielders instead, you do the same thing to them. You can also do this in the scenario that they are using a 4-4-2 against you. This allows you to literally take away everything out wide. However, once again, if they are ones that are causing you problems, I have noticed with 4-4-2s at least, do not trigger press them, just show them onto the weaker foot. Still trigger press those wingbacks or fullbacks, but don't do it to those wingers in the midfield. It creates kind of a clog in those areas, and you don't want that. Now, with those wingers in a 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, usually we are just going to show them onto the weaker foot. And with that number 10, we know weaker foot as well as tight mark. And then the striker, usually just weaker foot. So that is usually how you would want to have it in a general scenario. Now, with the opposition instructions, you don't want to do this going into every single game off the rip. Sometimes you want to adapt what is getting thrown at you. Now, what I mean by that is if you are playing against, say, a 4-3-3, the Blues in the 4-3-3, and you're wanting to do that trigger press and weaker foot on the wingbacks immediately, that might hose you a little bit. Why might that hose you? Because you do not know what roles they're utilizing yet unless you are scouting your opponent. So, if you aren't, and it's kind of an element of surprise, you find out during the match, then say this right back, instead of a wing back or a fullback, is an inverted fullback. So they end up having a 3 in the back. You cannot go ahead and trigger press that. There is absolutely no need to trigger press an inverted fullback. That kind of takes one of your players out of the game and makes your formation, tactic, and team lopsided at that point. Puts you at a disadvantage, and you don't want to be at a disadvantage. So you want to make sure that in those scenarios where you are not scouting your opponent, you don't know what exactly is being thrown at you immediately, you wait about 15, 20, 25 in-game minutes, and you see what your opponent is rocking. Once you are able to see that, you can then know, okay, this is where we need to make sure that we're locking down to suffocate what our opposition is able to do. And if they are utilizing an inverted fullback, that means, okay, a lot of their width is going to be coming from their wingers. So you want to make sure to focus on those wingers. If they have those wingers cutting inside, being inverted wingers or inside forwards, still going to obviously want to show them onto that weaker foot. But that means that they're going to be utilizing those wingbacks as a width. So you're going to want to trigger press, show them onto that weaker foot because it takes away the width. And now really quickly, I want to go over some of those tactical instructions that can kind of help you just get a little bit of an edge over your opponent. So we already talked about playing out from the defense. If you have pretty good ball playing defenders, obviously rock those ball playing defenders on defend, or if you're playing a 3 in the back, have them on cover if you wish to do so. You can obviously play those back 3 and a flat back 3 for ball playing defenders on defend if you wish to do so, but have it play out from the defense. That's what they're best at. You can do the same with central defenders as well. You're going to, a majority of the time, want to work the ball into the box. If you have it off, still you're going to do just fine, but work the ball into the box is a much easier and safer thing to do. For final third with crosses, I suggest low crosses or whipped crosses. The reason why I liked whipped crosses, they swerve and dip, and they make it harder for your opponent to kind of deal with. So if you have players who are pretty good at crossing and moving the ball, that might be towards your advantage. Yes, it might be harder for your strikers to bang it home or your wingers to bang it home, but still it's going to work better in your advantage than for your opponent. When we're in transition, you definitely want to counter press and counter. That is what some of the best and most overpowered tactics do this year. Counter press and counter. So going to be an aggressive style a majority of the time. However, you can still do very well if you would rather regroup then counter. If you want to counter press, hold shape, you can still do all right. But a majority of the tactics that are really, really good and really, really broken are counter press and counter. When it comes to distribution, do whatever floats your boat. But when it's out of possession, kind of matching what we just talked about with that counter press and counter, it's going to be a little bit aggressive. So majority of the time, you're going to want a high press. You're going to want a higher defensive line. You can do well with standard and standard, well, mid block. And then you can also do all right with a low block. People have proven low block does work. However, the best is high press and higher line. And trigger press, usually more often pressing intensity. So there we have it. I hope you guys learned how to kind of utilize player instructions and opposition instructions to your benefit, to where you are able to dominate anyone in any opposition that you end up coming up against. If there's anything in the FM world that you guys wish to see me go a little bit more in depth on, please let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you guys enjoyed today's video, please feel free, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribing is 100% free, so why not hit that sub button. Right now I'll be popping up my most recent video for you guys to enjoy. And up till next time, have a good one. Bye-bye.